In the age of dinosaurs, danger usually came with teeth, massive jaws, serrated fangs, bone-crushing bites, but one of the strangest and most unsettling dinosaurs ever discovered followed a completely different rule. It didn't rely on teeth, it didn't hunt like a predator, and yet, it carried weapons so extreme that even the most fearsome carnivores kept their distance. 3-foot claws, not talons, not hooks, more long, scythe-shaped blades, curved razors, and longer than a human arm. This was Therizinosaurus. It looks like a creature stitched together from nightmares. A massive body built like a giant sloth, a long, flexible neck, a small head with leaf-shaped teeth, and at the end of its arms, claws so large they seemed biologically impossible. For decades, paleontologists struggled to understand it. Was it a predator, a plant-eater, a killer that slashed its prey to pieces, or something far stranger? Because Therizinosaurus breaks almost every rule we associate with dinosaurs. It had claws larger than those of Tyrannosaurus Rex, but it wasn't a meat-eater. It stood as tall as a giraffe, but it moved slowly. It carried weapons, capable of disemboweling enemies, yet it may have used them to pull branches and defend itself rather than hunt. This contradiction is what makes Therizinosaurus so unsettling. Imagine encountering it in the late Cretaceous forests of what is now Mongolia. A towering silhouette rises above the vegetation. Feathers ripple along its massive body. Its arms lift slowly, each movement deliberate, revealing claws that glint like polished steel in the sunlight. This is not a fast killer. This is not a chasing predator. This is something that doesn't need to chase, because few would dare to approach Therizinosaurus around 70 million years ago, at a time when Asia was filled with fierce carnivores, tyrannosaurs, dromaeosaurs, and other deadly hunters. Yet in this world of teeth and speed, Therizinosaurus evolved into a walking paradox, a giant herbivore, armed like a living weapon. What kind of evolutionary pressure creates a plant-eater with claws longer than swords? Early discoveries only deepened the mystery. When the first fossils were found, scientists didn't even realize they belonged to a dinosaur. The claws were so enormous, so unlike anything known, that they were first mistaken for the remains of a giant turtle. Only later did the truth emerge. These claws belonged to one of the largest and strangest theropods ever to walk the earth. In this documentary, we will uncover how Therizinosaurus was discovered, why its claws grew to such terrifying lengths, and how it survived among some of the most dangerous predators of the Cretaceous world. We will reconstruct its bizarre body, step into the forests it inhabited, and explore the final mystery of its disappearance. And finally, we will ask one haunting question. If a creature like this lived today, would we see it as a monster, or as one of evolution's most extraordinary experiments? To answer that, we must go back to a world where claws replaced teeth, and where the most dangerous weapons did not belong to predators at all. The discovery of Therizinosaurus began not with a skeleton, but with confusion. In 1948, a Soviet Mongolian expedition was exploring the windswept deserts of southern Mongolia. The region was already famous for dinosaur fossils, yet nothing prepared the team for what they uncovered buried in the late Cretaceous sediments of the Nimek Formation. Protruding from the rock were enormous, curved claws, massive, blade-like structures unlike anything paleontologists had ever seen. Each claw was nearly a meter long. At first glance, they didn't look like dinosaur bones at all. They were too large, too thin, too curved. Soviet paleontologist Evgeny Malev examined the fossils and came to a conclusion that seems strange today but made sense at the time. These claws must belong to a giant turtle. He named the creature Therizinosaurus cheloniformis, meaning scythe lizard with a turtle-like form. It was a reasonable mistake. No known dinosaur had claws even remotely close to this size. Predatory theropods used teeth, not oversized arms. Herbivores had hooves or blunt hands. Nothing in the fossil record suggested a dinosaur would evolve 3-foot, long knife-shaped claws. For years, Therizinosaurus remained a mystery animal known only from these isolated arms and claws. There was no skull, no spine, no legs, just fragments that refused to fit into any familiar category. Some researchers doubted whether it was even a dinosaur at all. The breakthrough came decades later, as new fossils were discovered across Mongolia and China. Paleontologists began uncovering the remains of other strange theropods with long arms, pot-bellied torsos, and leaf-shaped teeth. These animals didn't resemble predators. They looked slow, bulky, and oddly bird-like. Gradually, a new group emerged, the Therizinosaurs. These dinosaurs shared unusual traits: elongated necks, wide hips, massive guts, and long claws, but they were clearly as more complete skeletons were found. Scientists began to realize that Therizinosaurus was not an isolated oddity. It was the largest and most extreme member of this bizarre family. By comparing the fragmentary Therizinosaurus arms to better-known relatives, like Allosaurus and Bapiosaurus, researchers finally understood what those claws belonged to. They were not turtle flippers. They were the arms of a gigantic theropod dinosaur, one that stood up to 5 meters tall and weighed several tons. Still, Therizinosaurus itself remains frustratingly incomplete. Even today, no fully articulated skeleton has ever been found. Most of what we know comes from massive forelimbs, partial ribs, and comparisons with related species. This makes Therizinosaurus one of the most famous dinosaurs, known largely from absence. Yet the evidence is unmistakable. The claws alone tell an extraordinary story. Their shape shows muscle attachment scars that indicate powerful arms capable of controlled, deliberate movement. These were not fragile ornaments. They were functional tools, supported by thick bones and reinforced joints. As more fossils surfaced, the old image of a giant turtle collapsed completely. Therizinosaurus was reclassified as a theropod, the same broad group that includes Tyrannosaurus rex and Velociraptor. But while its relatives used teeth and speed, Therizinosaurus took a radically different evolutionary path. This realization shocked paleontology. Here was a dinosaur that broke the theropod mold. A group known for carnivory had produced a giant herbivore, with claws longer than any predators. The discovery forced scientists to rethink what theropods were capable of. Becoming the fossils also revealed something else. Therizinosaurus lived in a lush, forested environment, not open plains. Its world was filled with rivers, ferns, conifers, and flowering plants. This context helped explain its strange anatomy. The claws were not for hunting. They were likely tools for feeding, defense, or display. Today, the original Therizinosaurus claws are housed in museum collections, studied with reverence and caution. They remain among the largest claws ever discovered in the fossil record. Even surrounded by the bones of giant predators, they stand out, not because of aggression, but because of sheer impossibility. The discovery of Therizinosaurus transformed our understanding of dinosaur diversity. It revealed that evolution does not always move toward efficiency or simplicity. Sometimes it creates something extreme, specialized, and deeply unsettling. A dinosaur that looks like a weapon, but may have lived a quiet life among the trees. Now that we understand how this creature was uncovered, the next mystery awaits. What kind of body could support arms like these? Therizinosaurus is one of the most physically confusing dinosaurs ever reconstructed. At first glance, its body seems to contradict itself, as if nature stitched together parts from entirely different animals. But when examined closely, every feature tells a story of specialization, survival, and extreme adaptation. Start with its size. Therizinosaurus was enormous. From head to tail, it stretched nearly 10 meters long, rivaling some of the largest predators of its time. When standing upright, it may have reached 5 meters in height, making it taller than most carnivorous dinosaurs that shared its environment. Estimates suggest it weighed between 4 and 5 tons, comparable to a large elephant. Yet despite this size, its posture was unusual. Therizinosaurus walked on 2 legs like other theropods, but its body was broad and heavy, with wide hips and a deep torso. Its center of mass sat farther back than in predators, giving it a slower, more deliberate gait. This was not a dinosaur built for speed or pursuit. Its head was surprisingly small for such a massive body. The skull was lightly built, with a narrow snout and leaf-shaped teeth instead of sharp, serrated blades. These teeth were ideal for slicing vegetation, not flesh. There were no bone-crushing jaws here, no signs of predatory adaptation. The mouth of Therizinosaurus was designed for cropping leaves, stripping branches, and processing plant material. Supporting the head was a long, flexible neck. This neck allowed the dinosaur to reach high into trees or sweep across wide areas of foliage without moving its heavy body. Combined with its height, Therizinosaurus could access food sources unavailable to most other herbivores, feeding on tall shrubs and tree canopies. But the most astonishing feature lay at the end of its arms. Each forelimb was massive, thick-boned, and extraordinarily long, and attached to each hand were 3 claws, each measuring up to 1 meter in length. These claws were flattened from side to side, sharply curved, and pointed like oversized knives. They remained the longest claws ever known in any terrestrial animal. Despite their terrifying appearance, the claws were not fragile. Muscle scars along the arm bones indicate powerful musculature, capable of controlled movement. The joints suggest flexibility rather than rigid slashing motion. These were tools, not wild weapons, swinging without purpose. So what were they for? Most evidence suggests they were used primarily for feeding. Therizinosaurus likely hooked branches, pulled vegetation closer, and stripped leaves using slow, deliberate motions. The claws may have also helped tear apart thick plant matter or dig into rotting logs to access nutrient-rich growth. Defense was another likely function. While Therizinosaurus was not a predator, it lived alongside some of the deadliest carnivores of the late Cretaceous, including tyrannosaurs. A charging predator faced, not teeth, but 3 enormous blades capable of inflicting devastating wounds. A single swipe could slash deep into muscle or discourage even the boldest attacker. The body of Therizinosaurus was covered in feathers. Fossils of related therizinosaurs show clear evidence of filamentous and feather-like coverings. These feathers likely served multiple purposes: insulation, display, and possibly intimidation. A fully feathered Therizinosaurus standing upright and spreading its arms would have appeared far larger and more threatening than its skeleton suggests. Its legs were thick and sturdy, ending in wide, clawed feet capable of supporting immense weight. Unlike fast-running theropods, its legs were built for stability rather than speed. This dinosaur could walk long distances through forests and wetlands, but it was not built to chase or flee quickly. The tail was relatively short and stiff compared to other theropods, acting as a counterbalance to the heavy torso. Combined with its wide hips and pot-bellied appearance, this gave Therizinosaurus a silhouette unlike any other dinosaur: tall, bulky, and strangely upright. Altogether, Therizinosaurus looked less like a predator and more like a living fortress, tall enough to browse above most competition, armed well enough to deter attackers, slow but not helpless, awkward but deeply effective. This combination of traits makes Therizinosaurus one of evolution's boldest experiments, a theropod that abandoned the path of carnivory and speed, and instead became a towering, blade-armed herbivore capable of surviving among giants. It did not need to hunt, it did not need to run, it simply needed to stand its ground. Now that we understand how Therizinosaurus was built, a deeper question emerges: how did a creature like this actually live? To understand how Therizinosaurus lived, we must picture its world not as an open plain of charging predators, but as a dense, humid landscape filled with trees, rivers, and thick undergrowth. During the late Cretaceous, the region that is now Mongolia was warmer and far more forested than it is today. Broad-leaved plants, conifers, and early flowering trees formed lush ecosystems where towering herbivores competed not with speed, but with reach. Therizinosaurus was perfectly suited to this environment. It was not a roaming grazer like hadrosaurs, nor a fast-moving browser like smaller theropods. Instead, it was a slow, deliberate feeder that relied on height, reach, and patience. Its long neck allowed it to scan vegetation above and around it, while its enormous arms brought food closer without forcing the animal to reposition its heavy body. A typical day for Therizinosaurus likely began at dawn. As mist lifted from the forest floor, the giant would move quietly through stands of trees, its massive feet pressing into soft soil. Unlike predators, it had little need for stealth. Few animals were willing to challenge something so tall and heavily armed. When it fed, Therizinosaurus likely used its claws with precision rather than force. The curved blades could hook branches, pull them downward, and hold them steady while the dinosaur stripped leaves, using its beak-like mouth. This feeding strategy allowed it to exploit food sources far above the reach of most herbivores, reducing competition and ensuring a steady supply of nutrients. Its diet probably consisted of leaves, shoots, ferns, and possibly soft bark. The wide torso and deep rib cage suggests a large digestive system capable of fermenting tough plant material. This meant feeding sessions could last for hours, with the dinosaur slowly processing vegetation while remaining mostly stationary. Despite its fearsome appearance, Therizinosaurus was likely a calm and methodical animal. Its slow metabolism and herbivorous lifestyle favored energy conservation over aggression. However, calm did not mean defenseless. Living alongside large predators required constant awareness. Tyrannosaurs and other carnivorous theropods roamed the same forests, searching for vulnerable prey. A healthy adult Therizinosaurus, however, would have been a dangerous target. When threatened, it could rear back slightly, lifting its arms and spreading its claws wide. This display alone may have been enough to deter an attack. If a predator pressed closer, those claws became weapons. A single controlled swipe could open deep wounds, damaging muscle or eyes. Therizinosaurus did not need to kill an attacker. It only needed to survive the encounter. Most predators would retreat after suffering even minor injuries. Social behavior in Therizinosaurus remains uncertain. There is no direct fossil evidence of herd structures, but comparisons with related species suggest it may have lived alone or in small, loosely associated groups. Juveniles were likely more vulnerable and may have stayed closer to adults for protection during early growth. Reproduction likely followed patterns seen in other Females would have laid clutches of eggs in shallow nests, possibly concealed among vegetation. Nest defense would have been intense. A nesting Therizinosaurus, armed with meter-long claws, would have been one of the most dangerous animals in its environment. Movement was slow but purposeful. Therizinosaurus could walk long distances when necessary, but it likely maintained a home range rich in food. Its upright posture allowed it to survey its surroundings constantly, spotting threats or opportunities from a distance. The feathers covering its body may have played a role in temperature regulation, display, or intimidation. When threatened, raising its arms and flaring its feathers would have made it appear even larger, reinforcing its dominance without physical conflict. At dusk, as shadows lengthened across the forest, the Therizinosaurus would settle into sheltered areas, resting its massive body and conserving energy. Its size alone discouraged nighttime attacks. Even the boldest predators would think twice before approaching a resting giant armed with blades. Therizinosaurus did not rule its world through speed or pursuit. It ruled through presence, through reach, through the quiet understanding that while it did not hunt, it could not be hunted easily either. In the forests of the late Cretaceous, it stood as a living contradiction, a gentle feeder equipped with terrifying weapons, surviving not by aggression, but by being impossible to ignore. But even such a strange and successful design could not last forever. The world was changing once again, and with it came the end of Therizinosaurus. Therizinosaurus survived for millions of years in a world shaped by slow change. Forests shifted, climates warmed and cooled, and predators rose and fell around it. Its unusual design, towering height, powerful claws, and a plant-based diet allowed it to endure where many others failed. But no adaptation lasts forever. By the end of the late Cretaceous, the world Therizinosaurus depended on was under growing pressure. Global climates were becoming increasingly unstable, seasonal patterns shifted, forest ecosystems began to fragment as changing temperatures and rainfall altered plant communities. For a dinosaur so heavily specialized for browsing tall vegetation, these changes mattered. Therizinosaurus relied on dense, productive forests filled with leafy plants. As these environments became less widespread, food sources grew less reliable. Open floodplains and drier landscapes expanded in some regions, favoring fast-moving grazers rather than slow, high-browsing specialists. The very traits that once made Therizinosaurus successful began to limit its flexibility. At the same time, ecological competition intensified. Other herbivores diversified rapidly, some smaller and faster, others better adapted to new plant types. These animals could reproduce more quickly and exploit a wider range of vegetation. Therizinosaurus, with its massive body and slow reproductive rate, could not respond as quickly to sudden ecological stress. Predators also changed. Tyrannosaurs grew larger and more specialized, dominating land ecosystems with improved hunting strategies and powerful jaws. While an adult Therizinosaurus remained dangerous, juveniles and weakened individuals were increasingly vulnerable. Even a species armed with 3-foot claws could be worn down by constant environmental pressure. Then came the most dramatic event in Earth's history. Around 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact triggered a global catastrophe. Wildfires raged across continents. Sunlight was blocked by dust and debris. Temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis collapsed. Plants died first, and for herbivores like Therizinosaurus, that meant starvation. Forests vanished in a geological instant. The towering vegetation Therizinosaurus depended on disappeared, replaced by barren landscapes and sparse regrowth. Even if some individuals survived the initial impact, the long-term aftermath offered no refuge. Without stable plant communities, large herbivores had no future. Therizinosaurus disappeared during this mass extinction, along with most non-avian dinosaurs. Unlike predators that might scavenge or adapt briefly, large plant eaters were among the hardest hit. Their size, once an advantage, became a liability in a world of scarcity. The extinction of Therizinosaurus was not dramatic in the fossil record. There are no final battle scenes preserved in stone, no signs of struggle. It simply fades from existence. Another giant unable to outrun planetary disaster, yet its loss represents something. A theropod that abandoned teeth for claws, speed for reach, aggression for deterrence. Its extinction marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an entire way of life. When the dust finally settled and life began again, the forests returned, but Therizinosaurus did not. The world had moved on. The age of giant, blade-armed herbivores had closed forever. All that remains are its claws, silent, curved, and enormous reminders of a creature that defied expectations until the very end. And still, one final question lingers. What if Therizinosaurus had survived? Imagine a modern forest, vast and protected, far from cities and highways. Morning light filters through tall trees. Birds scatter as something enormous moves slowly through the undergrowth. Branches bend, leaves fall, and then it steps into view. A living Therizinosaurus, standing taller than an elephant. Its feathered body rises above the vegetation. Its long neck sways gently as it feeds, and at the end of its arms hang 3 immense claws, each longer than a human arm, catching the light like polished steel. If Therizinosaurus lived today, it would instantly become one of the most extraordinary animals on Earth. Scientists would rush to study it. Cameras would follow every movement. Entire research programs would be built around understanding how such a creature eats, moves, and survives. It would rewrite textbooks on dinosaur biology, herbivorous behavior, and theropod evolution. But survival in the modern world would not be easy. Therizinosaurus required vast forests and enormous quantities of vegetation. Modern ecosystems are fragmented, divided by roads, farms, and cities. A creature of this size would need protected megafauna reserves on a scale rarely seen today. Without them, habitat loss would quickly threaten its survival. Human reactions would be mixed, awe would be universal, but fear would follow close behind. Those claws, built for defense, would not be easily misunderstood. Even if Therizinosaurus posed no hunting threat to humans, its sheer size and armament would inspire caution. A startled animal could cause catastrophic damage without ever intending harm. Conservationists would argue for strict protection. Governments would debate containment and monitoring. Zoos would be ruled out entirely. This was not a creature meant for enclosures or display. Therizinosaurus belonged to open forests, not fences. Ecologically, its presence could be transformative. As a high-browsing herbivore, it would shape forests in unique ways, trimming tall vegetation and opening space for new growth below. Entire plant communities might change in response to its feeding habits. Just as elephants reshape modern landscapes, predators would give it a wide berth. Even the largest carnivores alive today would think twice before approaching a fully grown Therizinosaurus. Those claws were not built for hunting, but they were more than capable of defending territory and offspring. In a confrontation, few animals would dare to test them. For humanity, Therizinosaurus would challenge our understanding of danger. It would force us to confront a truth we often forget. Not all threats come from predators. Some come from peaceful giants that simply demand space and respect. Children would grow up seeing Therizinosaurus not as a monster, but as a living symbol of deep time. Museums would tell its story not as a fossil, but as a survivor, and every glimpse of its towering silhouette would remind us that evolution does not always choose simplicity, but perhaps the most powerful impact would be emotional. To stand before a living Therizinosaurus would be to stand before an idea made flesh-proof that nature once created forms stranger than imagination, and that survival does not always belong to the fastest or the fiercest. It belonged, sometimes, to the most improbable. Therizinosaurus would not rule our world. It would not hunt us, it would not chase or conquer. It would simply exist, towering, blade-armed, and unmistakably ancient, a reminder that long before humans shaped the planet, evolution was already writing stories far stranger than fiction. And in a world that often forgets how wild it once was, the presence of Therizinosaurs would force us to remember.